Blodgett, and I'll be hosting today. And I'm joined this time by the goated one, Mr. Philip Leeds of Arids Only.
The goaded one, too.
Very happy that he's here this time. We've been
Making
struggling
stuff
to
up.
make our uh, make our schedules align for a little while, so this time we got it, and it's going to be a good webinar.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, before we jump into today's topic, which is I'm going to be covering kind of lighting layout, placement, and staging. I want to give a big shout out to Happy Dragons for making this possible. If you're not already familiar, Happy Dragons is a reptiles first platform. And basically, we've got a whole community over there. We've got a Discord server with a lot of amazing keepers, people dedicated to their animals, dedicated to learning about their animals and sharing about them. So I want to encourage everybody to head over to the Discord, join there. And then pretty shortly here, we're going to be launching a new app with all kinds of value added content, lectures, webinars, a course, expert Q&As, expert consulting, all that kind of stuff. So to support people on their journeys with, advancing their reptile husbandry and welfare. So um, look for the link to the Discord in the chat and in the video description, and come join us and share what you're working with. So, with that, we're going to dive into the lecture, and I'm going to share this window. Here we go. All right. So, today we are talking about staging and placement of our lighting. So, this is part 3 of our series on lighting. And this is a fun topic, so we're just going to dive right into it.
Dude, those are just can we just take a second and admire those two opening photographs? Like, my goodness.
Thanks, my dude.
Not just well composed, well lit imagery, but my goodness, well cared for reptiles.
Thanks, my dude.
Yeah.
All right. So, in our last 2 lectures, we've discussed the basic components of lighting as it applies to herpetoculture, that being infrared, visible light, and ultraviolet, and how each of these perform essential roles in the well being of our captive herpetofauna. And in this lecture, we're going to explore blending these spectra and staging them for the optimal benefit to our animals. So, one helpful concept to understand when exploring this subject is that of color temperature. And in simple terms, this is the temperature that is described by the appearance of warmth or coolness emitted by a given bulb. And this is going to be expressed usually in units of Kelvin. So you might notice that on like a bulb you're buying from the hardware store or something like that, it might say a number. Usually it's going to be a 4-digit number and K value to indicate the color temperature. So lower K values translate to warmer temperatures, while higher K values translate to cooler temperatures. And if we apply this to our bulbs, it's pretty intuitive to find that our halogens express the warmest color temperature. You know, they've got that nice orange, warm glow to them. They're usually around 2,700 to 3,000 Kelvin, followed by our LEDs. LEDs have a really wide range of color temperatures depending on what you're getting, but usually in the application for the vivarium or like plant growth, they're usually going to be between 4 to 6,000 Kelvin. And then our T5 high output UV fluorescent bulbs are going to be usually around 6,500 Kelvin. And so knowing this, that can inform how we stage our lights as they turn on. So with this in mind, let's consider the quality of light throughout the day. During sunrise, the angle of sunlight through the Earth's atmosphere produces a warm color, and that gradually increases in intensity and brightness through the day. It peaks at sun zenith in the sky, and then it gradually begins decreasing in intensity and again expressing that warm color at sunset. So we can approximate this same arc in the vivarium setting by staging when our different lights turn on and off throughout the day. So to simulate sunrise to midday, our halogens should turn on first, followed by our LEDs, followed by our UV T5s. And to reverse that order, you can go simulate, midday to sunset. And here's kind of a little table with an example of how you might do that. This also has a benefit in the sense that, say all three of your lights, if you're using three different fixtures, you have a halogen fixture, you have an LED fixture, and you have a T5 fixture. If those are all turning on at the same time, they're going to be on, for that full, say you have a 12-hour photo period, they're going to be on for a full 12 hours. Whereas if you're staging your lighting like this, your LEDs and your T5s are going to be on for a much shorter period of time. You're going to save a lot of energy, and you're still going to provide all the benefit that those wavelengths provide to your reptiles.
This is I've been using this term for a little while now to refer to things like this, which
Mm-hmm.
this is I'm calling them racks, which is a resource aware care system.
Yes, I love it.
Which
I
is,
love it.
yeah, it's like something I'm really into, and it's the it's not just the simple, not, and this isn't simple at all. That's not what I'm saying, but
Yeah.
it's not just the simple understanding of your resources and how they pertain to your care, but it's also like maximizing the resources and your care system in conjunction, so that way it makes what you do more efficient from your perspective as well, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you just noted the way that staging the lights coming on, the way they ramp up and ramp down, has an effect on your power bill, right? Like it's going to save you
Exactly.
energy. It's going to make it more sustainable. It's going to allow you to take what you save there and theoretically put it into your herps somehow, maybe for more diverse feeders or something like this. So this is like the perfect example of the foundation of a resource aware care system, a rack, if you will.
Yes.
Is
I
that
like
awesome?
it.
Is that the
Yeah,
stupidest
that's
act
fun,
ever?
man.
It's great.
No, it's
Anyway, sorry.
perfect. I like it. Flips it on its ear as it should
Yeah.
be. And I also, one thing I was going to say too is that for if you're really again being resource aware, as Phil is introducing here, one thing that I will actually do sometimes is I'll have what I call a biphasic cycle with my halogens. So I'll actually
Mhm.
turn my halogens off during the peak of the day,
Mhm.
because I find that a lot of my animals, this isn't for all of them, but a lot of them um, have a basking preference for kind of morning and evening basking. And so to a save on energy costs, because halogens are so resource hungry, I'll actually just have those halogens turned off in the middle of the day, some
Mhm.
of the time. And so they'll have kind of like two periods where the halogens on in the day, morning and evening, and then off in the middle.
I do exactly the same thing because, especially during peak summer hours, the
Yeah,
ambient temperature in the space is so high that the animals
exactly.
they're still gonna be peak. They're still gonna be ripping around, making the most use of the heat sink that is the basement, right? So I don't do it
Right.
automated the way a lot of people do, like where it's, you have your halogens hooked up to a separate timer where you do it this way, but I
Right.
do it manually where I walk through the space and pop off I just unplug the halogens during the peak hours of the day for like an hour or two. And it can make as
Yeah.
much at this scale, it can literally make the difference between hundreds of dollars. And
Yeah.
it can be a couple
That's
$100, a month, which is a
Yeah,
lot.
it's so true. And that's the other reason why I do it too, that you said, like in the middle of the day, your
Yeah.
ambients are often so high that it also actually
Okay.
that can also help save on power, because like in my spaces I have a mini split to kind of
Yep.
control my ambient temperatures. And so
Yep.
if like the halogens are on, it's just creating a competition between the mini split trying to cool the space down while the halogens are trying to heat it up.
Totally. Totally.
And so that really helps.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, so let's move on. So the keeper can easily achieve this kind of staged lighting schedule using smart outlets. There's also some thermostats, like for example, I use the Herpstats. They have features that allow for this kind of staged lighting. And there are even newer fixtures on the market that allow for it with use of a phone app. So like the Luminize system is a good example of that. And the Luminize system even has like this dimming effect where it kind of dims on and off to even amplify this kind of gradual, peak in intensity, and then gradual, you know, decrease in intensity throughout the day.
Mhm.
But you can also just do this manually, like Phil just described. There are benefits to sometimes doing things manually because you are in a routine of like getting eyes on your animals and on your enclosures several times a day.
Mhm.
Some of us, our schedules don't allow that. We might leave for
Sure.
work or whatever, that kind of thing. In that case, maybe smart outlets are a better use. But there are just many ways that you can do the same thing.
And the smart outlets are a great opportunity, a great option for if you're trying to be maybe a little bit more chaotic about it. Because if it's not programmed, you can just manually, a lot of those things, you can just be like, you know what? I'm out at work. It's 105 degrees. Like all the halogens off just today.
Yep.
You know, you just think about it, right? Because that's, making it less of a routine can be stimulating for the animals where, where it's more random and chaotic in the way that the world would be.
Totally.
Or a simulacra of the way the world would be anyway.
Yeah. And we'll be getting into that a little bit more later on in the lecture, because that's something I definitely want to touch on. So perhaps even more important than the staging of our lighting is the actual placement and layout of the fixtures themselves. So an optimal layout is going to allow for some overlap of the different spectra provided by our bulbs, and it will allow for blending them for the best approximation of sunlight. So here's an example of like a hypothetical lighting layout that might achieve this objective. You can see you've got your linear T5 high output fluorescent. You've got these kind of two, maybe we call these dual dome or dual fixtures with a halogen, and then maybe a Phonolux, the new kind of true chroma LEDs. And then you've got like a linear LED bar. And the idea is that once these are all on, they're going to emit these spectra that are kind of going to overlap each other and blend together. And it's that blend of where all these spectra kind of overlap on top of each other that creates that kind of best approximation of sunlight. And I feel like this is important again we spoke about this in our last lecture when we were talking about visible light, but this is especially important to make sure that you're blending your LEDs with your other lights, because LEDs are so bright and they have so much light intensity that a lot of our animals, especially our kind of heliophilic, light loving species, diurnally active species, they're going to preferentially often bask where the light is brightest, even if that's not necessarily where it's warmest or where there's the best UV output. That's just how they've evolved to respond essentially to the conditions around them, is to respond to sunlight, right? Which is an all-in-one. So we want to create that blend of the lighting as well as we can. Anything you want to add on that, Phil?
No, at least nothing that
Okay.
pertains exactly to this, because for me, so much of my understanding of lighting comes from the art world, right? So
totally, yeah.
Maybe it's different terminology, but it conveys the same concepts, which is, direct and indirect, temperature, color temperature, and then angle, all of this stuff, it all relates to one another, and it's going to translate to what you're placing on the picture. And it applies if you treat your enclosure like a painting, you're basically achieving the same thing. But
exactly. Yeah, well said. Okay, so another factor to consider when lighting our reptiles is photoperiod. And photoperiod describes essentially just the daylight hours within a 24-hour period. So that's going to vary seasonally throughout the year, depending on geographical latitude. And the further from the equator you are, the greater that seasonal photoperiod variation is going to be. To kind of illustrate this, I've kind of put these little different locations and photoperiods to kind of visually illustrate it, where you can see, in this kind of northern latitude, Del Rio, Texas, roughly, there's like a 4-hour difference at different times of the year in daylight length. Whereas if you get down into Panama, that difference is reduced to less than an hour. And then if you get all the way down south to somewhere like Tasmania, where it's like a really, really far south place, you're going to see like a 5-hour difference or more in daylight period, depending on the time of year. So WeatherSpark is where I've gotten these graphs, and it's an excellent resource to utilize when assessing the photoperiod your reptile might experience in its native range. And from there, if you want to get really like nerdy and granular, you can actually like plan a calendar essentially to adjust your lighting schedule to match your animal's natural photoperiod. And that really helps to encourage, a myriad of natural behaviors from brumation to reproduction and beyond. Sometimes this also will just happen naturally because, again, there's going to be ambient light in most of our reptile rooms just from outside. We're going to have windows in our rooms potentially that are letting in that ambient light, that are contributing photoperiod to some extent. And often it can be helpful to if you have a species that comes from a similar latitude to where you're living, you can just align the photoperiod essentially with your ambient photoperiod that you're just experiencing outside, right? And that's going to really amplify the effectiveness of that. And often, if you're not doing it intentionally, your animal's taking note of it anyway, which I'm sure, like Phil, I think you've spoken to that before,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like your Euros know, and they just put themselves to bed when it's time for brumation, right?
Yeah, if anything, like the animals tend to be the cue for, it's like, okay, it's time to start shortening days because I haven't seen this info for 2 weeks, and so it's such a wonderful thing to take note of. And I know it can be discouraging to many people, like you can, because oftentimes these the way I've put this in other circumstances is that the animals, oftentimes what we conceptualize as a happy, healthy lizard does not necessarily overlap well onto seasonal patterns of behavior, right?
Right.
But if we tune our understanding of what a healthy reptile looks like to fit something more that also corresponds to seasonal variability, well, then it's directly in line with that particular ethos.
For sure. Yeah, well said. Okay, so moving on. Lastly, another element to consider in the placement and staging of our lighting is controlled chaos. So this is something that Phil and I are big proponents of. We both love talking about this. So nowhere in the world do our reptiles experience perfectly stable environments and conditions. They're subject to seasonal change, they're subject to weather, other environmental factors, and all of these things introduce an element of generative chaos into their lives. So to simulate this element of chaos in a safe manner under vivarium conditions, the keeper can introduce random variables. So here are some examples. You could occasionally rearrange your lighting layout to encourage movement and cognitive enrichment. Say, you can move your basking, your basking halogen, say a little bit over to this way or that way, to encourage your animal to move around and again find where it needs to go to bask properly. Another thing you can do is you can turn off one or more of the light fixtures for a day to simulate kind of a weather event or a cloudy day. And again, as we kind of spoke to earlier with staging our lighting, this also is a way to save on utility usage. So if you think about, like, if you plan 1 day a week, for example, where you just turn off your halogens, that's 1/7 of the energy, that you're using each week is eliminated there. And that's a huge savings in terms of like your utility usage. And also it can provide some benefits to your animals. I think we've spoken earlier about how in previous lectures about the influence that thermal regulation has on our animals' metabolisms and all of that. And it's also healthy for our animals' metabolisms to rest, which is, again, why we don't want to provide them light at night. This is another way that you can encourage that kind of rest for the metabolism. And I think that it's highly likely that in like a long term, this probably extends the lives of our reptiles significantly to do this kind of thing, to just give them a break, slow down. So
definitely. And I feel like this theme of like sort of, generative chaos, or another way of thinking about it in specifically herpetocultural terms, is just pure novelty, right? Novelty in all its forms, right? So you're looking for, in this case, we're talking about ways to use lighting to generate novelty as well as sufficient, care minimums, right? You have to balance those two things against each other all the time. But this novelty extends to everything that we do, from the arrangement of all the features in the enclosure to food to, just doing random things like adding new types of bedding into an existing enclosure, just from very, very simple, and I don't mean like replacing the entire bedding. I'm talking about like, oh, I found this great new set of, you can buy this bag of rocks at Home Depot. Yeah. Just going to go scatter those rocks throughout every enclosure, and the animals get to see these things, right? Everything from that to throwing a toilet paper roll inside the enclosure and letting the animals explore it. There's been actually lately, there's been I've seen quite a few videos of this sort of thing online with people. If I'm not mistaken, it was Reptiles in Research. Maybe it was Elliot Liam, I think. And forgive me if I'm mistaking this for someone else, but I think what they did was they scented newspaper with a bunch of herbs and then shredded the paper and put it inside of a box and put it in for one of their snakes. I'm pretty sure. It's like
I think that was them.
And like that's a brilliant example of novelty and originality, and it's like zero cost, because these are things presumably any reptile keeper is just going to have lying around. This kind of anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent, but you get it. Novelty.
No, that's it's so true. I think that again, this is like pretty much everything that we're doing again is encouraging healthy complexity, right, within our systems. And because again, we want to that is what contributes to cognitive well-being and physical well-being for our reptiles. It's the same for us, like we need some novelty and enrichment as well. And
stimulation.
And this is exactly, it's stimulation, which means difference, which means change, which means something new, right? Of course, within parameters that are safe, but it's such a beneficial thing. And also I think that it really creates much more resilient animals in the long term, because we want our animals to be able to tolerate, like, say there's a day, where you have a power outage, if you're regularly or on an occasional basis turning off your reptiles' light fixtures, it's not going to be as much of a shock to them as if you just have them at constant, temperature, stable environment all the time. And so what we want is to encourage that resilience in our animals.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to.
No, please. No, please.
I have two anecdotes that relate to this intimately. Right? So one is that it's not uncommon at all for a lot of people who breed Uromastics to typically hang on to them for a while. Like the old, 10, 15 years ago, the ideology was you have to keep them for a while to make sure they're stable and ready to go, as opposed to sending them off to new homes. Maybe the thinking was that it might be too young, too early, too whatever. And what I found was that animals that were held for much longer had a much more rough transition, like the transition, right? Because they're used to this stable set of conditions and they haven't seen a whole lot of novelty, right? And so then you all of a sudden change them at this period in their life when they're really getting good growth. Whereas if you send them off as a baby, they're not used, not like a fresh baby. I mean,
everything's novel.
Like a 4 to 6 week old baby. Not only is everything novel, but everything inside of them is telling them grow, get bigger, get stronger. And then the second anecdote is it's pretty well known that there's a lot of leopard gecko breeders who they exclusively feed mealworms and just like free feed them from a dish, which is like, okay, fine. Like I understand that has merits and I'm not discounting it entirely, but like I've heard countless anecdotes from people who I've recommended to get a leopard gecko as a pet from so-and-so or whoever. And the animal has a really hard transition because the kid is not thinking I'm going to leave mealworms in a bowl. The kid is thinking I'm going to throw grasshoppers and grubs and waxworms. I'm going to do everything because why wouldn't you? Right. Because like, that's the way most people think about a pet, especially a new one, is they want to try all the things, and that animal's not ready for that. And they either go off feed for a long time. They don't recognize the same circumstances of the setup. Maybe they came from like a very simple medicalized rack system type setup, and now they're going into like a more complete, let's say, vivarium, and the animal's just like, whoa, it's this overwhelm. And you have that whole mix of confluences that are all conspiring to make it a rough transition. Whereas if you're regularly introducing your animals to novelty and change and some level of like minor disruption, if it's also better for when they go off to new homes, it's going to be an easier transition for them. It'd be less stressful, and that's better for you or for the animal and for their new keeper. It's just an easier entry point, right. And the last thing I'll say before we move on, I'm sorry, is like the other nice thing about introducing this kind of novelty is it teaches you about your animal too, right? You get to see how much they respond to how little change you can make. And you can get a sense for whether or not, okay, turns out this animal in particular, because they're all individual personalities, turns out this one really doesn't like it when I change things that much, right? Whereas these other ones over here, they're much more resilient and they're intrigued by that change, right? So you're getting a sense for the animals too, which is, you got to get to know your animal, right? You have to.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's actually the perfect segue into this next slide, which is just, it's important to acknowledge that this introduction of chaos can also introduce stress, and a strong understanding of your animal's baseline behaviors and tolerances should inform how you provide this form of enrichment for your animal. And so that applies both, like, when I say your animal, I mean like the species that it is, but also the actual individual that it is, right? Because like you said, across a given species, every animal is an individual and they're going to have different preferences. Like this snake that's photographed here is a pretty sensitive snake. And I have others of the same species who are a little bit less sensitive, who are a little bit more tolerant of disruption and handling and that kind of thing. This girl, I just tend not to bother her. I try to really just give her lots of space, really gentle and slow around her when I'm interacting. And that's, again, it's just, that's something that I've learned from just observing her and getting to know her over the years. And that's going to inform all of this. So these are things that you may not introduce to your animal's kind of system right away necessarily. But it could be something that you introduce over time, or again, like if you're getting a baby animal, it could be fine to start out right out the gate with this kind of routine or schedule that has this ordered in chaos, because they're, again, in this more malleable adaptive state just as a baseline. But having an idea of what your animal is, what your animal needs, is really important.
Absolutely. And another thing too is, I feel like that this touches on is just, it's yet another reminder that the animals all have a point of view, which is, and I don't mean to, like, I'm not trying to attribute super complex thinking in that regard. But what I'm saying is, the animal inside, it's not just you looking at the enclosure and seeing the way things are set up, whether they're to your preferences or not. It's also the understanding that all of that is translating to the interior experience of that animal in their enclosure, right? They're sort of their herpetocultural umwelt, right? They're that what it's to be in that enclosure, right? Very, and that, I feel like that just helps so much, thinking about the fact that they've got an experience of that space in there. It's not just for your suitability, or it's not suiting just you, it's suiting them and their preferences, their needs, right?
Absolutely. And hopefully, I mean, them primarily, you secondarily, on some level.
Right.
All right. So that concludes our series on lighting our reptiles in today's webinar. So we're going to have more of these coming soon, different subjects, of course, but our next webinar will be announced soon. So stay tuned for that. And if anyone's watching live right now and wants to throw any questions or clarifications on lighting into the live chat, please feel free to do so, and we will be happy to answer anything. So I want to give, again, acknowledgments. I've given these same acknowledgments for the last three lighting webinars, but goes without saying that these folks are the ones who we're really building off of with all of this. And so it's important to acknowledge them. I highly recommend everyone goes and joins the Reptile Lighting group on Facebook, if that's something that you're on. It's a great group, and all of these people are active contributors there. And so where you can find me and Phil, this is our stuff, our socials. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Patreon. There's our website for our podcast. Check out our podcast. We've got new episodes hopefully coming soon. We're on the Spotify and all other providers under the Animals at Home Network, and we're also on YouTube. So check us out, and we'll get to the live chat questions now.
I gotta pull up YouTube, right, so I can see those.
Yeah, or there might be a tab, Phil, in the lower right.
Oh, yeah, live stream chat. Yep, whoops, never mind. Don't want to demand too much of the internet.
Yeah, totally. No kidding. I'm the
Yeah.
one that's usually got to really worry about that, right?
Oh, dude, I know. For some reason today, the internet here's been shady. I don't know what's going on, but yeah, it just hasn't been that dependable. So I'm trying to keep my tabs to a minimum here.
Good.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it's also
Yeah.
worth noting too, folks, that anyone who's watching live, that we're going to be doing actually a scheduled, just general husbandry live chat in a few hours. We're going to be hopping back on, and anyone that wants to jump in there too, it's welcome. We can also save questions from today's webinar for that live chat later, if it makes sense, if people want to tune in. So one couple things in the chat. Savannah noted that her beauty completely shifts in behavior immediately after the solstice, which totally like makes sense again with the whole photo period thing that we're talking about. Also mentioned keeping this species. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, but I think it's a skink species from the Solomon Islands, where the Eugongolius albofasciolatus. But it keeps pretty constant there, which is like, again, yeah, if you're on the equator, like the Solomon Islands, like a lot of the stuff I keep from the Guiana Shield, there's going to be almost no change in photo period, but there are going to be other seasonal shifts that might be relevant to how you keep.
Yeah, like wet and dry season, right? Like monsoon
exactly,
season
wet and dry season.
Yeah.
So that's the main variable that I'm manipulating with, cycling my animals rather than photo period. It's going to be more of that, but
I have a bunch of I have that difference even within just Uromastyx. I have Uromastyx thomasi, and they're from Oman, which is quite equatorial, right? So there's very, very little seasonal shift for thomasi. But then I have Sara hardwickii, which is from India and Pakistan, and for them it's like absolute boom and bust. When you look at wild photography of them, wet versus dry season, it's like Martian landscape and then like a front lawn and a golf course during the wet. You're like, good God, it's surreal.
Huge difference.
Total massive. And but you could easily blanket it and say it's like Uromastyx, so just keep it hot forever,
So cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty surreal thing to watch, those little shitheads. Those hardwickii are getting pretty big. Sorry.
That's so cool.
Yeah, they're getting monstrous. They're like weasels. They're like meerkats, is what they are.
I actually really like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. It checks out. It totally makes sense.
Yeah, and they also are so clearly that they're almost like sort of a missing link between Uromastyx and Laeolepis, because the Laeolepis, the butterfly,
they look like that.
Yeah, they have a common ancestor which migrated west, which is what eventually resulted in Uromastyx, right? Like that's the sort of the migratory pathway of their ancestors. But when you look at the spectrum, if you go from like Moroccan Uromastyx to Sara hardwickii to Laeolepis guttata, you're like, oh yeah, I got it. I see it. I see it.
They're kind of right in the middle between these two, right? That totally makes sense.
Yeah, they're little weasels, little meerkats.
I love that stuff.
Anyhow. Oh wait, no, I meant the humidity and temperature trends appeared constant. I'm not sure I understand. Maybe I didn't follow. Sorry, Savannah.
Yeah, I'm kind of a bit confused too. Hi, Wayne. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Mel. Looking forward to having you for the live chat later too. Okay, question. It might sound dumb, but would nocturnal reptiles need stronger lights so at night they can absorb the heat?
No.
No.
So
not a dumb question at all. So you want to go for it, Phil?
Yeah, sure. So the way I think about most nocturnal reptiles is in like 3 parts, right? When they're going to get some level of lighting, both from when they emerge around sunset for most of them, as well as moonlight, right? So you're going to see lighting is going to be one component. Then you're going to have heat, which is the second component, right? And so you're going to be thinking about heat in 2 ways. One is, what are they going to be taking advantage of in terms of leftover heat from the sunlight on the features of the environment? And then second is, what level of operation are they utilizing when it cools off later at night? Like, what are they doing?
Mhm.
Are they tolerating the cooler temperatures and thriving at that temperature too? Or are they retreating to a burrow, which has a more consistent temperature? Like, what's happening there and why?
Mhm.
Right. And so anytime you have a nocturnal reptile, you're still dealing with a huge gradient and a kind of photo period or lack of photo period, right? Like an inverse
Mhm.
of a photo period. You're still dealing with it, and you're still dealing with the same changes and the same issues of heat, light, humidity, et cetera, et cetera. But you're just kind of, it's, most of that heat is probably not coming from a light source most of the time, right? Or at least
Yeah.
not right away. Yeah.
Yeah, so like a good like nocturnal heat source, if you need one, which oftentimes you don't, but for some like tropical species, like say you live in Colorado, but you're keeping a mangrove snake,
Yep.
a nocturnal snake species from Indonesia, then you're going to need a supplemental nighttime heat source to just boost your ambience. And for that, I would recommend something like a ceramic heat emitter or a
Yep.
radiant heat panel because those
Yep.
don't emit any light, but they'll
Yep.
still help boost your ambient temperatures a little bit. But then I would still use the same diurnal lighting that I would use for anything else
Totally.
because even those nocturnal reptiles, though they're primarily active at night, very often they're still going to be exposing their bodies to those diurnal wavelengths in the
Mhm.
wild just as they would in captivity. And so it's a good idea to provide for them anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Wayne, this is a good question. Are there any truly nocturnal slash diurnal animals, or would most fall into a category of crepuscular, into the crepuscular category? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that in like raw definitional
Hmm.
terms, like, but I would say yes, definitely to both. But
Hmm.
again, people quibble with these definitions because animals that we generally think of as nocturnal will not always be nocturnal. They'll be active at other times during the day and evening
Hmm.
and as you said, crepuscular. And the same thing is true of diurnal reptiles. Like we think of them as, even collared lizards, for example. You go out and you
Hmm.
see them running around at peak activity in the morning, and then the sun sets, but there's all this leftover baking heat on the rocks, and there's the
Yep.
ambient occluded light from the sky that's reflecting downward, right? And so they'll come out at that time too
Hmm.
and at that time they're getting a totally different kind of exposure, right? They're getting
Right.
they're still getting some levels of UV, right, bouncing around from the atmosphere, but it's just nowhere near as high. It's a totally different ambient temperature. It's a different humidity. There's more or less wind, maybe all kinds of cool stuff. So technically, like, both, will be active at all kinds of times, but also, yeah, I do think there are. I think probably,
Yeah.
definitionally truly diurnal and nocturnal animals for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that there are some species that are truly definitionally nocturnal, diurnal, just as you just said, Phil. But then I think a lot of reptiles, and perhaps the majority of reptiles, are pretty malleable in
Yeah.
terms of their activity. And so, like where I live, for example, a lot of the snakes here are diurnal in the
Mhm.
spring,
Mhm.
and then peak of summer, they're nocturnal because it's just too hot here during the day for them to be active. So I'll see the same species, like say a California king snake. I could go out on a nice day in April when it's in the 70s, and I can see them diurnally active out cruising around.
Mhm.
Now it's 110 degrees outside. I'm not going to see them until a few hours after sunset because the
Sure.
temperatures have to drop.
Yeah,
So it's just so dependent on so many different factors. But I think a lot of animals are flexible.
definitely. Wayne also said, I find most of my animals tend to sleep in places that still allow them to access the light. And then Tarantula loves to sit out under her light during the day and tucks away.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, for sure. I mean, all the animals I have here do that too. They choose their hiding places preferentially based on time of day. They choose ones. A lot of the Uromastyx love to hide in areas where they can still get hot, right? So they'll still
Yep.
sit underneath a hot stone, right? So they're still getting like a pretty high, like 100-degree, 105-degree ambient inside that particular hide, or
Yeah.
they're getting bounce light. Maybe they'll hide with like just an arm or half their tail out, exposed to the light into the UV, right? Which seems like almost like it would be a mistake, but it's actually
Hmm.
probably,
Hmm.
not a conscious choice. It's a subconscious choice by the biology saying, oh, we need a little bit here. Let me get a little bit, right? So there's all kinds of ways that the animals will interact with different kinds of light. And we've talked about this before, Roy, too. Like one of the things you so rarely see with captive lizards, except in some, well, maybe not rarely, but not as much as you see it in the wild, is like that lizard that's up on a stone and up on all fours, basking and looking directly at the sun, you know?
Yeah.
And you're like, man, that one's so hard to get inside that one particular, and it's such an iconic.
That's really cooking. Yeah, that's really you got to get it really cooking for that really kind of like exactly where it's like, okay, maybe this is actually unsafe in captive conditions, but totally, but it's exactly. I totally know exactly what you're describing. I love that. I was seeing that with the earless lizards in West Texas earlier this year, and I was seeing them. They're like literally even their toes are up. They're like balancing on like their like
palms,
like their palms basically, and just cooking at like 125 degrees. You know,
it's wild,
so
man.
Cool.
Yeah, I've had it's great weather here, so I've been sunning a lot of the lizards, the ones that I can anyway. I can't get the desert iguanas out there; they'll take off. But
they'll rip.
But they're maybe in a screen or something. Yeah, super fast. But I had the Thomasai out there, and I had a bunch of stones laying in the tub that I was sunning them in, and one of the Thomasai did that, just stood up on all four,
nice,
with mouth, and was like just on it, just full like peak Thomasai, you know.
Yeah,
and you're like, all right, dude, your peak male physique right there,
yeah, exactly, peak performance.
Such dumb lizards, man.
That's the good stuff. Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what else is out there? Anybody got any questions, observations, thoughts about all this? And again, we're going to be back in just a couple hours for more kind of general husbandry live chat, just shooting it, talking about whatever relevant herp topics that come up.
Hell yeah. That's okay. I like bullshit. This is good too.
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah, man. It's nice to have a summer in this new space and kind of learn the quirks of the space and see who needs what. And man, I'm pretty sure one of my desert iguanas is gravid, by the way.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm surprised. She's super lumpy. Okay. Fine.
That's great.
Put nesting stuff in there. So yeah, it'd be cool. It'd be crazy to see some little dipsos this year.
I'd love that, man.
So cool. I'd lose my mind. It'd be great. If you want a very specific question, this is Mel. If you had a collection of 50 blue tongues, how would you provide the heat and light? Oh, I mean, sure. So okay, here's the thing. If it's a collection of 50, in order to determine how the lighting is going to look, you got to know where the animals are, like what's the space, right? Because that's going to dictate, like the lighting setup might be roughly similar to what Roy showed earlier in those graphs, but the big components there is going to be the staging, right? Like how do I stagger the lights to turn on and off, especially based on the way that amount of lighting is going to heat the room. Because you're going to have so many lights in a situation with 50 blue tongues, right? Yeah. Presumably, if you're not keeping them in a rack, right? So you're probably going to have, well, if you're keeping them in a resource-aware care systems type rack, you're probably going to have lighting, right? So so you'd have to have a lot of different. There's so many different lights, and you probably have to stagger the wattage from floor to ceiling, right? Because presumably you're going to have multiple cages stacked on top of one another, unless you have just a sufficient space to put a whole flat row of everyone on the same level, which would be amazing to be able to have that much space. That'd be insane. But I feel like I was there. But but you probably have higher wattages in the lower enclosures and lower wattages in the higher enclosures, right? You probably have to stagger the higher enclosures to come on first and then turn off first, especially based on the fact that the lower enclosures are they're going to heat up at a different time, but their heating up is going to heat up the higher enclosures, right? So you want the top enclosures turning on first and turning off first, and the lower enclosures turning on last and turning off last, right? In order to get that, try to avoid all that rising heat to affecting the top enclosures and changing the peak temperatures, right? And then it's also, what are you going to have in terms of, are you going to opt to have LED lighting as supplement supplemental lighting, or are you going to just stick with halogens and UV? Because that's also going to change the layout of the lighting if you only have UV and not other supplemental light. And if you're only working with halogens and UV, you may need more halogens, or, you know, to get, because something I find all the time is you know, in order to get, because again, any basking area for any reptile, the whole idea is to make sure that that entire animal's body can fit inside that full, if it's a Euromastix and the peak basking site is 125 degrees Fahrenheit air temperature, the entire length of that animal fully stretched out from tip of nose to tip of tail should be able to fully fit itself underneath light that is hitting 125 degrees from tip to tail. So unless you have only tiny species, you absolutely need more than one halogen to give them that proper basking, period. Yeah. Right. And this is true of your blue tongues. So you might need five, because those are pretty big lizards. You might need 5 halogen spotlights angled, overlapping one another to get a sufficient, 25 watt bulbs, right? Doing dirty work, right? It could be crazy. And it's going to depend on what the interior of the enclosures look like, because if they're basking at a high point, that's where you want your highest temperatures, and then it falls off from there. That's going to determine the wattage of the bulbs you have, right? And that's also going to be informed by how close your UV lights are to the basking surfaces, so that way you're not getting too close in a dangerous range, but not too far away to where they're not getting sufficient UV. So all of this stuff has to inform, like, every part of your care informs the rest on some level. So that's how I would answer that question. I know that's maybe a more generalized answer, but
there's a little bit. So Mel added a little bit more context. Each in a PVC enclosure, 3 to 4 feet, black. Currently, everyone has a halogen. Bulbs are not really available anymore, so need to upgrade. So I'm not sure, Mel, if you're in the US or the UK, but if you're in the US, there are still some halogens out there that you can get. There's a really great one that I know Phil has been recommending highly, by Reptile Systems. They offer an eco halogen, which is really great because you can actually replace the filament of the bulb, just the filament, rather than the whole entire bulb. It's more economical, and they're just really nice, long-lasting, high-quality bulbs as well. So those are things to consider in terms of halogens. One thing that comes up for me is I know that TC Houston, you might already be familiar with TC Houston of Reptile Mountain. He's a blue tongue specialist, and he recently, this was probably a few years ago now, but redid his entire setup for blue tongues. He had been keeping some in racks. He switched them all over to more Vivaria, highly enriched enclosures with, overhead lighting, UV, everything. He would be a great person to check out his YouTube channel. And also he's done some podcast interviews specifically discussing this for a large collection of blue tongues. So, given that I don't have personal experience with blue tongues, I would direct you to go check that out, because he's a highly respected breeder of blue tongues. And again, this is something that he kind of came to after keeping them in some more simple kind of Spartan conditions for a really long time. He made this big transition. He said, I'm going to keep fewer animals and more highly enriched setups with better lighting, better quality of everything. So yeah, he's a great person to look into. And he's also been pretty active on YouTube and everything. So
another one would also be Ron and Heather at Fairy Tale.
Of course.
They're keeping their blue tongues outside. They're keeping them outdoors. You can still glean a lot of the thinking and methodology from observing their posts and their setup, right? Like, this is something that I think most people probably know, but it never hurts to remind people that you can glean a lot of understanding from just observing the way people are doing it well, right? So
totally.
Really quick, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. These are those Reptile Systems eco halogens.
Okay? Yeah.
And what's another, Roy already mentioned that when you replace these, you don't replace the entire unit. You're only replacing the inner filament, so you still get this kit, and this continues. You can use this as long as you want. It's ceramic as well, which is extra nice because it's safer, and it's going to last longer. I've been using these here in the shop for, I don't know, like a year or something, or almost, like whenever they basically almost as soon as, about a year now, almost a year. And I've only replaced one internal filament, one. One.
That's awesome.
Yo.
That's great.
And additionally, one last thing, and I shameless
No,
plug.
no, this is great.
Go to Dr. Tim's Aquatics, which is the US supplier for reptile systems. They're the place where you get it. You can use the code ARIDS10, ARIDS10, and you get 10% off any reptile system stuff. So that's
nice.
It's just awesome. Yeah, 10% off.
Phil got the pro code there.
Pro code, dude.
Awesome. Yeah.
Shut up, Roy.
No, seriously,
No,
that's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's really cool. And the whole thing is nice. Like, I don't mean to make this into a deal, but like even the thing. So this is the casing, the little corkscrew.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
insert the filament right into that, and then you screw this into the unit, and it completes the kit. I mean, this is sick.
Awesome.
This is a sick piece of kit.
It's
like
so cool.
Replacing all the bulbs with this, it saved me money too. My power bill dropped by almost $150 just switching to these bulbs, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like,
that's awesome.
Fuck? That's really crazy.
I
Sorry.
love that. I love it.
Swear.
No. Yeah. That's going to be, as soon as my current batch of halogens burns out, those are what I'm going to be upgrading to. I'm really excited for those.
For sure. Yeah.
So yeah. All right. So any other questions out there? Mel, yeah, I think you should be able to get those same bulbs in Canada. I hope. I think that they're available in Canada.
Yep, they are.
And yeah, another one in addition to Ron and Heather, in addition to TC, is Frank Payne. He also keeps blue tongues. Yeah. Not at large scale, I don't think, is not quite at that scale, but again, another person who does a great job with his animals and would be another one to potentially look into.
Oh, and Root Scoots and Scales, don't they have a bunch?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true. Dan and Stacy at Roots, Scoots, and Scales. They're another great duo that do great with blue tongues.
They got great stuff. Yeah. All of them doing good, great, cool stuff. All of those people we just mentioned doing really cool things. That's so sick.
Yeah.
It's so sick that there's
just sweet people
shortage.
Too.
Yeah. There's just no shortage of cool people to point to and be like, look at these guys doing great. That's awesome. That's such a cool thing.
I love that. Especially, I mean, for like, being able to say that for one, genus or, taxon is so nice. It's not like that for everything. Some stuff is just so obscure. There's just no one out there.
Yeah, that's true. Like desert iguanas and Frenenax.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And Polychrus peruvianus.
Oh yeah, or whatever. Yeah. Some dumb anole dude, some stupid wannabe chameleon. These
exactly
unbelievable anoles barely get by. Barely. Just barely. Oh God, it's so dumb. So
all right.
We're doing a Q&A.
Yeah. So pretty shortly here. Let me double check the time on that. Or maybe Savannah, would you mind popping into the chat with the timing on the when we're going live for the general husbandry live chat? But we're just going to be hanging out. Phil and Savannah and I are going to be chatting, catching up probably a little bit, but then we're also going to be available if folks have questions or curiosities, anything you want to ask us about just general reptile husbandry. We're there to support, help out in the best way we can. If we don't have an answer to your question, hopefully we'll be able to direct you to one of our friends who is more experienced in that particular area of herpetoculture who would be able to help. So yeah, that's going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific. So just in a couple hours here, we're going to be jumping back on for that. And yeah, it'll be right here on the Happy Drakens YouTube channel. So easy to find. We're just going to take a little break here in between so Phil and I can go enjoy our Sunday time a little bit.
I've already enjoyed it, damn it.
Even more enjoyment on top of the enjoyment.
Yeah, no. Every day is just work down here. Yeah, these iguanas, man. These San Esteban iguanas are nuts. Like they're so.
Oh
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're getting. So I got two from a guy named Curtis Toulson over in Arizona. And they're unrelated to my male, Gregor Mendel. You know Gregor, you met him.
Yeah. Of course, yeah.
The one of the two young ones turned out to be a young male, That was
Oh,
Ruth.
nice.
And so I was like, bro, and he was super cool. He swapped it out for a female, and he took the
Yeah.
male back and set him up and outside out there. But the dude, that lizard was a monster. Like he was huge and crazy. Like I
Yeah.
worked with him from day one, just like I did with Ruth. And Ruth is
Yeah.
cool as a cucumber, and that guy, or I mean Susan rather, was cool as a cucumber, and the
Yeah.
Ruth not happy.
They're
Like,
hardcore. Tenosaur are
spicy.
not to be trifled with. They are
Spicy.
formidable lizards.
Yes.
It looks like Mel's noting.
Oh yeah,
I got
that's
some
right.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, that's
Right
great.
on.
Oh, ended up being 2 girls. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. That's great.
That's
Yeah,
one of those species that I wish I could
Oh,
have.
they're just
But being in California, they're native here. It complicates everything a lot. But I used to have Great Basin collards, Vestigium.
yeah, those are great too.
But also,
no,
that was back when I was or Bison Torres. Yeah, sorry, Vestigium is the Bajas.
Yeah.
Bison Torres. But yeah, I had those guys back when I was a teenager, and now since then all the laws have changed in California. The native stuff is totally different. So
yeah.
But if not, I would definitely have probably both of those species here because they're just so cool.
Dude, the Baja collared, everybody loves the Dickersoni, which like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
get it.
They're amazing.
Amazing
Yeah.
lizards. But for me, the Baja is the king of crotophytus. The Baja and then the reticulate collard. Those two just take the cake for me. I've worked with so many collard species. And produced several, like 5 or 6 different species, and they're just like, they're such incredible little lizards, you know?
Yeah.
Truly little velociraptors. Like, no joke.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
They're little monsters.
Maniacs. Yeah. Such capable, bouncy boulder obligates, you know? Just there's no containing a collared lizard, man. They will not.
I really wanted to see reticulatus in the fields when I was in West Texas. But couldn't quite get to the right spot.
Amazing.
Just outside of their range, but they're such cool lizards.
Amazing.
One of my favorites.
God damn. Yeah. I wish, I would love it for those to be keepable, but they're not.
Yeah. I know. Same.
God damn.
Maybe someday. Who knows?
It's great that they're out there. Stay there. It's
yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that's like, God, you'd be nice. Just a couple of them. Come on.
Just a couple.
So cool. Just yeah. Anyhow, let's call it, and then we'll come back in an hour and chat about.
All right, everybody. So we'll be back in a couple hours here to jump back on. 2 hours.
Is it 2? I thought it was.
5 p.m. PST. So right now it's 3 PST. So 2 hours.
Whoa. Oh, 2 hours. Okay. So for me, it'd be 2 before, so 6 here. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. All right, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and contributing to the live chat. We appreciate you. And I hope that the information has been useful.